Hello, nice to meet you. I am Chae Yong-sung, and I would like to worship for God together. And the topic is face to wait and experience the great God of salvation. The chapter is Genesis 45, verse 5 to 8. I read, do not feel sorrow because you sold me here. Do not lament, for God sent me before you to save life. 2 years of famine has been in the land, but 5 years have yet to be plowed and harvested. God sent me before you to preserve your life and to put your descendants in the world with great salvation. Therefore, it is not you who sent me here, but God. God made me father to Pharaoh, lord of all his house and ruler of all Egypt. We always expect everything to go well, but we also meet any ambush in marriage, work, study, and church ministry. We have used this experience a lot of with the COVID-19 last year. However, our whole life has always met many ambushments. Today's text is set in the dysfunctional family history of Jacob and Joseph. However, I met many dysfunctional families such as the Jacob and Joseph families. In several previous small meetings, the problem is that the men in the small group have a more serious dimension than Jacob. Jacob is a liar, but most who did not cheat and fulfill financial responsibilities, but heads of all the small gatherings were cheating, addicts, and irresponsible. Sisters always have a lot of spiritual helplessness in situations where there is no answer when they hide their tears. But now, more than 10 years later, I have heard the great news of God's salvation. I heard the news that God's great salvation came to children who had many wounds and complex traumas like Joseph. So since my spiritual helplessness has been heard a lot, I would like to express my deep gratitude today. Even though today's text, I bless all over you who have difficulties in the COVID-19 situation to discover God who offers great salvation. In today's text, Joseph's home was a dysfunctional home. Let's look at verse 5. Joseph, who was inexperienced favoritism by his father Jacob, was sold to Egypt in the manner of human trafficking because of hatred and jealousy of his brothers. But before the third trauma here, he suffered another trauma. Although Joseph was a slave in Potiphar's house, he lived a faithful and prosperous life and eventually became a family secretary. However, the lies of Potiphar's wife led him to jail as a molester without any legal protection. Even a prison, he lived honestly and good, but he was not protected by political or legal protection. Like the diaspora, the recent immigrants and North Koreans, they have not received adequate legal protection. It was Homo Sakera, a political theologian named Agamben, George Agamben. In other words, it was an abandoned non-political life group that was abandoned only by laws that could not be protected by law. In addition, It was a subject, subaltern, that could not be communicated in mainstream language. That is, beings who were forgotten even if they had a dream interpretation in prison. If I were, I would have been frustrated, dreaming of escaping, of feeling helpless. But Joseph the dreamer didn't. In today's text, Joseph, who became a prime minister, faced simple other brothers from dysfunctional families. Verse 5, Joseph says, "Don't worry, don't lament. God sent me before you to save life." In other words, it was obviously sold because of my brothers and became a diaspora and migrant. But Joseph makes a strange saying that God moved me before my brothers to save their lives. Also in the verse 6, we present a realistic judgment that there has been a famine for 2 years, but will be no famine and harvest for 5 years. It is said that you are in the midst of a realistic survival crisis due to famine. In verse 7, God's alternative is introduced. I tell you that God sent me as a preemptive migrant before you to preserve your life with the greatest salvation and put your descendants in the world. In other words, even the life of the diaspora sold as human trafficking is actually a providence and preemptive response in God's great salvation. In addition, because the preemptive response is a great salvation and providence, it is said that it is God's great salvation to take care of not only the life of Jacob's family, but also the descendants of the nation of the Israel in the future, that is, to the next generation. Verse 8, they say that the life of a diaspora and the decision-making agent of migration is neither me nor you, but God. Also, I confess that I did not become prime minister because of my efforts, but God became the ruler of the whole land of Egypt, saving the nation and the world in providence, and that I became prime minister and performed the diaspora mission in the wonderful way. Judged that Joseph was so good at politics that he had made the mistake of reinforcing the supremacy of the Egyptian empire in international politics at the time, in that the descendants of the Israel people later fell into enslavement in the powerful emperor order transformed into evil. I think it makes sense, but the future God gave greater salvation through the exodus from the emperor order, even if Joseph had a long politics. After all, from Joseph's point of view, he seemed to be thrilled as he looked at himself through the pictures of God's sovereignty, providence, and great salvation. Like Romans chapter 8, verse 28, he seems to confess that to those who love God, those who are called according to his will, things cooperate and lead to good. There are many wicked people in the world, like Jacob's family and Joseph's. That's functional families and Potiphar's wife, but God showed the great salvation in spite of the brothers' human trafficking. God changed the plan, transforming evil into good and leading to historical good. In the end, God made Joseph's diaspora life, but took care of Homo sapiens' life, who was not properly protected by law. In addition, he raised the greater providence of salvation and the common good that saved many lives despite the turbulent life, the weakness, sins, and survival crisis of Jacob and his brothers. God, who writes the narrative of the rivers and rivers, unfolded an amazing life drama for Joseph, individuals even in the era of famine, which is likely to come after COVID-19. He wrote the personal narratives of rivers and reversals in the life of a dysfunctional family and diaspora, and made a narrative of healing, forgiveness, recovery, and resilience by combining the narratives of Christ and reversal while using the weakness, sins, and demons that operate in the dysfunctional family history. And in the end, the narrative of the common good, the narrative of the kingdom of God is accomplished, and God has accomplished great salvation. In the end, God's providence made the nation of Israel through Joseph beyond ever and unfair life, and made a huge narrative of salvation. Our optimistic or pessimistic outlook, multi-layered management heads, and plans are uncertain. In the end, the one who surely guides our steps is the God of hope, the God of providence, and the God of great salvation. Even if we do not know God's big picture well in the area of COVID-19, because everything is problematic and difficult, such as dysfunctional families, family conflicts, economic collapse, self-employed people, migrants, defectors. I bless you who live in true faith, hope, and love in God of great salvation, although a lot of discouragement and wandering in the fuzzy fields and difficult reality. As I said before, my last small meetings were a city of Janus, where reality and ideal were too opposite to hypocrisy. In small gatherings, we spoke, sang hymns, and expressed gratitude, but there was no money to go home from church, and the refrigerator was always empty. However, God, who saved them with great salvation, still saves North Koreans and immigrants with great salvation, and takes care of our lives and great salvation. So I bless you who live in faith in God, recognizing the Lord's sovereignty. I bless you to be great livers who await and experience God's detailed salvation, multi-layered salvation, and great salvation through a life guided by one step and one step faith. Thank you very much for listening to my sermon. I bless you. Thank you very much.